Hey, Dog Nation, my name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia, and glad to have you with us. I guess got a little bit of a voice thing going on today. I apologize. I don't know if you could pick up on that or not. Also, let me just say this. I know yesterday we had a little bit of an issue with the audio stuff on the YouTube side, and it apparently was only YouTube. Some folks have been working kind of behind the scenes last 24 hours or so. Hopefully that's better today. Y'all let me know in the comment section. I'll try to monitor that during the show. I know that's frustrating. Obviously, we want to work very hard to make it a consistent, enjoyable product each and every day, and so your feedback is certainly helpful on all of that. Busy show for us. It's Connor Riley stopping by later on. More details about our big event coming up on Friday that I cannot wait to see so many of you at as we get back together again in person for the first time in a while. DawgNation Days of Summer there at the Battery, Atlanta, and Truist Park. Let's see what else. By the way, speaking of moving things back to normal, there's some good news on that front when it comes to Georgia Bulldogs. Some big talk here from UGA linebacker off the top of the show. Optimistic assessment of a Georgia wide receiver and his hopeful return from injury. So much to do. So glad to have you with us for it. DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Dial 678-ESOG now for a solution to your foundation and waterproofing problems.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Before our regular show begins, I always take a moment to greet our video audience, and as I was doing that this morning, I was kind of noticing the old voice sounds a little raspy here. Quick confession, then we'll get on with the topic at hand. I do coach my son's baseball team. I also coach my daughter's soccer team as well. And for whatever reason in life, I'm just a loud person. There are certain people that are just louder than other people. I'm one of those people. I have a tendency to just sort of coach very loudly, and I guess last night I was coaching a little too loudly. So you hear a little raspiness in the voice. I think Kirby Smart's a little bit the same way. It's one of the reasons why if you ever are around, one of those, around campus during the time Georgia's practice and whatever else, you hear Smart kind of booming into a microphone. It's one of his ways of, I guess, trying to save his voice. Maybe I should start trying to do the same thing a little bit. So a little raspy here today, but nonetheless feeling great and really excited about the show and very interested to begin things this way. I thought that Georgia linebacker Adam Anderson had a very interesting tweet as of late, and it's not just interesting for what Anderson himself says, it's actually interesting for the topic that it introduces around Georgia football. Let me show you this for those of you watching on the screen, and we'll kind of get into it. So I guess it's 24/7 Sports puts out their list of the top 10, pass rushers, edge rushers coming back for the 2021 season via Pro Football Focus, and obviously some people care about those kinds of numbers more so than others. You see usual suspects on here, guys like Kayvon Thibodeau and obviously Nick Bonito for Oklahoma a year ago. The Oklahoma pass rush got way better last year than a lot of folks realize. You see Will Anderson on here from Alabama. Maybe somewhat surprisingly, Brenton Cox is on here from Florida. I don't quite know what to make about that. But Adam Anderson sees the list, tweets it, kind of gives you kind of a, I guess you call that like a frowning emoji or whatever else, and says, I'm not surprised they overlook us as always. So Adam Anderson feeling like the nation doesn't quite realize what Georgia is going to have as a pass rush for 2021. And obviously the unspoken context to all of this is Anderson himself feels like he is going to be a big part of that. And listen, I'm not really quite sure what you make of the 24/7 Sports reference to the Pro Football Focus stuff here. As I said before, certain people value the PFF numbers more so than others, but on the idea that maybe Anderson and some of these Georgia edge rushers have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder to prove to you how good they can be this upcoming season, I can promise you that. Me, you, every other Georgia fan that's a part of our broadcast right now, we all like the idea of that. Everybody likes the idea of this team playing with an edge, on the edge, if you'll pardon the pun, to go out there and show exactly what it can be. Now, while nationally some folks might not be noticing Georgia, might not be thinking too much about Adam Anderson or Nolan Smith, the guy that Connor Riley, who will join us later, wrote about this morning at DawgNation.com, obviously, around the program, there is seemingly a lot of energy around this group. Let me go back to a few weeks ago. Do you remember when we had Azeez Ojulari on DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia? I asked him on the show what he thought about the guys looking to, kind of follow in his footsteps and fill the shoes that were so prodigious for Georgia a year ago, what Ojulari did from a pass rush standpoint. Well, on this show, Azeez did not hold back in his belief that Anderson, who we just talked about, Nolan Smith, the other guys who we'll mention in this context, that he believes they are absolutely setting up for a big year when it comes to getting after quarterbacks. In fact, this is what Azeez Ojulari had to say about that.
There's going to be a whole lot of sacks coming this fall for sure. They let Nolan and Adam, and don't sleep on Bill too. They let those boys get off the edge. It's going to be a dangerous fight. There's going to be a whole lot of sacks coming this season. I promise you that. Adam's so fast. Bill, strength, first step. Nolan, quickness, strength. I'm telling you, man, if they let those boys loose, it's going to be a crazy fall in Athens, man, for sure.
If they let those boys lose, it's going to be a crazy fall in Athens. And I think I speak on behalf of a lot of Georgia fans when I say, well, if that's the case, then by all means, let them lose. Let them go out there and do their thing. Because, look, I do think Georgia fans believe that Anderson can have a really big year. And I do think that Georgia fans believe that Nolan Smith can have a really big year. And, yes, they share playing time, which means they share snaps, which means they sometimes share and split each other's sacks and stats and productivity and all that kind of stuff. But it's good to have them both. And you also heard Ojulari there kind of give a shout out to the Tennessee 3 with Bill Norton. He mentions him in the midst of all this conversation there as well. But Ojulari, you'd obviously know, he has played alongside these guys, looking at what's still at Georgia now that he's gone, says, there's going to be all kinds of sacks to be had around this Georgia program here for this upcoming season. And to add to that, one of the most interesting things that Kirby Smart said during spring practice was about the idea of replacing Ojulari and who gets a chance to be that guy following the footsteps of Ojulari, who obviously provided so much for Georgia a year ago. The bowl game win against Cincinnati may be the most prominent example of that at all. And as you think about these edge rushers, the phrase that the 24/7 Sports graphic used a moment ago that Adam Anderson had referenced on Twitter, sometimes that's outside linebackers like Anderson or Nolan Smith. But as Kirby Smart said this spring, sometimes that's also those guys who are playing a little bit more of a traditional defensive end type role there as well. So if we're talking about, the edge rushers for Georgia not getting enough attention, former 5-stars like Adam Anderson and Nolan Smith are part of that conversation, listen to who else Kirby Smart wants to make sure that you all kind of keep in your mind in this conversation for where the pass rush comes from Georgia this year. This was fascinating from Kirby Smart back in the spring. Let's get a reminder of that right now.
I'm looking for everybody on the defense to improve. We have to create pass rush. We have to create havoc. We have to do those same things. I thought last year was probably one of our best years ever in terms of sack production, and Dan has done a good job making that a priority by the way he schemes the defense and the way he calls the defense. And we had productive rushers, but a lot of that was, what he called and trying to scheme to get guys one-on-one. Trevon's the guy that's going to have a big year for us. Not only is he replacing Malik, but in a lot of ways he's replacing Azeez. And I think everybody just assumes with Azeez being gone that it's like Nolan's job. It's not like that for us because 60-70% of the snaps, Trevon is Azeez and Nolan is Azeez. They're just one's left and one's right. So both those guys play defensive end a lot.
There is so much to unpack from Kirby Smart right there. It is all fascinating. 3 kind of things that jump out to me. I love the way that Smart says that at the very beginning, because sometimes coaches like leaving for themselves some wiggle room. For instance, if an offense is struggling, a coach might say, listen, we don't care how many points we score. We're just trying to win the game, trying to take pressure off of whatever might be deficient at any given moment. But Smart right there when it comes to the sacks and the havoc rate, the tackles for loss, those things we've talked about so much. The 3 words that Smart uses at the beginning of that clip I think are emphatic and they're unmistakable. He says, we have to. This is not an option. This is not a, hey, as long as we win games, who cares what the defense looks like? No, he says there is a certain makeup and complexion this defense has to have. We have to get after quarterbacks. We have to make that a priority for the program. We have to have sacks. We have to have tackles for loss. That is not a negotiable characteristic of our defense. That is something that has to be there. I love that strong language from Smart. He also says, listen, last year we got better as a pass rush, and he says it's actually the priority that Dan Lanning made that because of his play calling, the way that he schemed up the defense that led to that being true. And I think that is something that Lanning ought to get a lot of credit for because clearly Georgia has improved in that category. Let's go back to 2018 for a moment. Back in 2018, Georgia was just 12th in the SEC in sacks. They had 24 in the season there in 2018. In 2019, getting a little bit better, Georgia moves up to 7th in the SEC in sacks. They got to 31. Last year, short season, remember that. You're only playing fewer games and you're playing only SEC competition. But Georgia actually had 32 sacks a year ago, which put them 3rd in the SEC in sacks last year. You see year over year over year improvement when it comes to Georgia and its pass rush. I credit Dan Lanning for that. It is one of the reasons why I think one of the untold stories for Georgia so far during this offseason is the fact that Georgia's held on to Dan Lanning. He has changed the makeup of this UGA defense. I think he's changed it for the better. Even though the defense probably didn't play great in its 2 biggest games a year ago, the identity of the defense is evolving, and I believe evolving in a very good direction. And, of course, finally, the last thing you'll say about what Kirby Smart said a moment ago is the presence of Trayvon Walker. And I'm going to be, just kind of simple here for a moment, but I think sometimes there's a lot of truth in simplicity. How could you not be excited about a front seven that has Trayvon Walker, Nolan Smith, Adam Anderson before you even start mentioning some of the other names that are there? Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean, whatever else. How could you not be excited about that? And listen, sometimes in life things don't quite work out at the full kind of top end of what you thought was possible. But I tell you this, I can promise you Dan Lanning and Kirby Smart will go to battle with the 3 names that I just mentioned, kind of leading the way for this Georgia pass rush. And if Anderson says, listen, I think the nation's overlooking me, overlooking my teammates, there's a chance that actually might be true. I mean, 3 years worth of improvement when it comes to the pass rush is itself a trend. And Georgia is trending up there in that category. And a whole bunch of former 5-stars have a lot of NFL potential right there within their grasp if they can just take another big step here this year. I kind of agree with Adam Anderson. I don't think the nation quite knows yet how good this Georgia pass rush can be. And for a Georgia defense that's breaking in some new names in the secondary, kind of needs all the help that it can get, the presence of, as Azeez Ojulari said, a whole bunch of sacks in Athens this fall, that could certainly be a very good thing. All right, very quickly here, let me transition to something completely different for a moment. I'm going to show this on video, and for those of you listening radio and podcasts, I have to describe this to you, but a very interesting tweet came out this week with a photo that might take a little bit of interpretation, but once you kind of figure out what it means, I think we're heading in a very good direction, not just as Georgia fans, but college football fans we head towards the fall. You look around, all around us, there are signs that the world is coming back to normal. We've been through a rough go of it here last year and a half, whatever it is. But, man, there is so much optimism right now about the way things are improving and the way life is starting to get back to normal. And sometimes I think our job is to simply just take yes for an answer. Let me show you this on the screen here. Beautiful photo from John Bateman, UGA staffer, of the scene around Sanford Stadium. Now, for those of you watching on video, you may not quite know what you're looking at, but look at what's not there. In those seats right there in the middle of the stadium, all up and down those rows, the chairback seats that oftentimes are just kind of a nice little perk for season ticket holders who want to purchase them, but unfortunately in 2020 became the barrier for social distancing. Those things are all coming out right now. All of those chairback seats are coming out, which I think if you read the replies to at Mayor of Millage on Twitter, John Bateman's tweet there, I think you get the sense that a lot of folks take that as, ooh, boy. He says it's a big day, and it is for a lot of Georgia fans because they realize the social distancing seats are coming out of Sanford Stadium, and all of a sudden now that idea of, free-for-all for everybody back between the hedges this fall, it seems all the more possible. Of course, this upcoming weekend, Georgia's also got full crowd availability at Foley Field for a big Diamond Dogs baseball series against Ole Miss. There's been lots of great news coming out of the state of North Carolina as of late. Now the obvious assumption, and it's I think even beyond an assumption at this point in time, it is going to happen, full crowd for Georgia Clemson there in Charlotte. Folks, it's happening. It's getting back to normal. This upcoming fall is going to be a blast. I can't wait to celebrate all of it with all of you. We have been through a lot, and things are about to get better in Athens, in Charlotte for the season opener, and everywhere else around the SEC footprint. What a great time to be a college football fan as we head towards the 2021 season. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Engineered Solutions of Georgia, and glad to have you with us no matter how you get to us today. Video, all kinds of platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. I know we had the little bit of a YouTube thing yesterday, but it seems like hopefully that's back to normal here today. Radio Noon, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref podcast, wherever you find them. The Apple Player, the Google Player. A lot of you listen there on Spotify, worldfamousDawgNation.com. You listen directly through SoundCloud, all kinds of podcast platforms, all kinds of ways for you to get in touch with what we're doing here, and none of this would be possible that our friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia. You know, ESOG is a great recommendation from me for you because of a few reasons. First of all, they're proud partners of UGA, makes them really fun to do business with. They've been good friends of ours here at DawgNation Daily for a long time. I love encouraging you to support those who support the Georgia football program, who support our show here, DawgNation Daily. That's just a really good thing to be able to do. Plus, when you're a homeowner, you know the importance of dealing with a foundation or waterproofing issue. You're talking about the structural integrity of your home. Your home, arguably the biggest investment you have, and you want to do everything you can to protect that. That is what the folks at Engineered Solutions of Georgia have dedicated their life to doing. They have 2 full-time engineers on staff. That means they are experts in whatever might be afflicting your home if you're dealing with one of those foundation waterproofing issues. The other good thing is they're a solutions-based company, which means if it's a simple fix, they'll just tell you that. They're looking to solve your problem, big or small. So the time is now to get in touch, and the number to get in touch with them could not be easy to remember. You've been hearing me say this for years now. Simply give them a call, 678-ESOG-NOW. That is 678-ESOG-NOW, and that'll get you in touch with my friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia. It is so good to have them, and you, of course, as a part of DawgNation Daily with us here today. Now, we're going to get Connor Riley coming up in just a couple of moments. Kroger Fresh Take coming up with him. Before that, though, I do want to go around the doghouse, and much like a moment ago, I went back into time and let you hear something that I thought was very interesting that Kirby Smart said from spring practice. I want to do that again right now, and I want to do it on a completely different subject. I've told you before that I don't know that any one word spoken by Kirby during the spring that caused my ears to perk up more than anything else was something that Kirby Smart said about wide receiver Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, who obviously we all saw suffer just a horrible injury. I'm talking about just a grotesque video of the injury that he suffered on a touchdown scored near the beginning of the game against Florida. You talk about, and I'm not making a lot of the injury situation for Rosemy-Jacksaint because he's obviously been through a lot. You know about my mood changing so fast after the Zamir White touchdown to start that game, the Rosemy-Jacksaint touchdown to kind of keep the momentum going, but then you realize he's hurt and everything that happens after that. What a horrible, horrible turn of events for the wrong and the bad that was for Georgia a year ago. And to be completely honest with you, and I hate to be negative, but to be completely honest with you, when I saw the injury that Rosemy-Jacksaint suffered, I mean, I was just under the belief that, man, this was going to be a long, hard recovery, and he was going to have to really lean on his support system, his family, his friends, and everything else. It was just hard to watch, and injuries like that often come with a lot of rehab and a lot of time-consuming, painstaking efforts to get back to where you were before. But something that Smart said this spring led you to believe, wow, maybe things are actually going way better on this, admittedly, than I assumed they would be by this point in time. This was great from Kirby back then. Take a listen to this.
The depth has taken a hit, obviously, with George. Jermaine's been back running around doing some things. He's getting a lot more flexibility. Marcus Rosemy's really close. He's out there running around doing walkthroughs, doing conditioning. You see him on the side getting to run, and you know that he's close to being healthy.
Close. That was the word that Smart used. And I got to tell you something. It did feel great to realize over the course of the last couple of weeks just how close Kirby Smart is on that. I should say how close Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint is to being able to return. We showed you the video the other day of him making the really good one-handed catch, and obviously that's always a cool thing to see, but it was the mobility that was showing during that video that was so impressive. And now we have another one of these videos that we can show you there as well. In fact, let me put this on the screen for those of you watching on video. Receiver Factory out of Fort Lauderdale shares this. Look at Rosemy-Jacksaint cutting and doing kind of like a cone drill, working on his skill set and everything like that. Boy, when Smart said close about Rosemy-Jacksaint, it caused me to perk up because that's not the word I necessarily expected to hear from him so soon. But the videos we've seen lately, including this one right here, would absolutely lead you to believe that that's not an exaggeration on Smart's part to say that he is close to being able to return. And think about what this means for Georgia. I told you yesterday, we were talking about Aaron Smith. There are 4 former top 10 recruits in the Georgia wide receiver room right now. And unfortunately, 3 of them are coming back from injury. Well, given the fact that Aaron Smith showed off some blazing speed at a UGA track event over the course of the weekend, you can expect something pretty big from him. Given the fact that we've seen these videos kind of leaking out of Rosemy Jackson going through some pretty aggressive training right now, it sounds like he may be closer and closer and closer to being a guy you can contribute, ask for a contribution from there as well. All of a sudden, on paper, even with George Pickens dealing with what he's dealing with, the Georgia wide receiver situation, from a talent standpoint, actually seems deeper than it's been at any point in time under Kirby Smart. We know how important that offensive upgrade for Georgia is this year. But the talent might be in place, especially if a guy like Rosemy Jackson is on his way back. For Georgia to have more weapons out wide, more opportunities for JT Daniels to have dynamic playmakers to throw to, than Georgia fans are used to seeing. The Rosemy Jackson videos that we're seeing right now, man, that is really good stuff to be able to see. That is Around the Doghouse. Before I bring on Connor Riley here today, let me remind you of what I told you yesterday. So I know some of you had gone to Braves.com/DawgNation to buy your tickets for our event coming up on Friday. You were told that it was sold out. We have opened up some more spots available, but this is not like one of those things we're just going to keep doing this. Like, truly, there's only so much space in the facility where we're going to be meeting at and enjoying the dinner at. So there's we're about at our limit on that, so please get in today to get your tickets if you haven't. And if you've been missing a few of our shows, you don't know what I'm talking about, let me kind of give you just a quick synopsis of all this. So DawgNation getting back together for the first time in a long time this upcoming Friday. It's our DawgNation Days of Summer event. We're going to be live at the Battery Atlanta and Truist Park as the Braves get ready to take on the Pittsburgh Pirates there that night. It's part of Alumni Weekend for the Atlanta Braves. We're helping kick all that off. And tickets for this event are just $77 per person. Here's what it includes. All of us going to the Braves game together that night, the entire DawgNation staff that's there, and all of you are going to be sitting together in that lower level diamond corner section as the Braves get ready to take on the Pirates that night. We're going to do a bunch of giveaways. You're going to have a chance to win Braves signed baseballs, Braves tickets to upcoming games, or some gift cards to the Terrapin Tap Room. That's the space where this event's going to be taking place. It's all starting at 4 p.m. We're going to have a DawgNation get-together. We're going to be talking some Georgia football. We'll do a live broadcast. We'll do one of the Q&As like we've done before for our DawgNation Days of Summer events. We're all going to enjoy dinner that night by Fox Brothers Barbecue. You'll get 3 different drink tickets for the Terrapin beer that's there at the Terrapin Tap Room. Of course, Terrapin, kind of an Athens original there, so that's kind of a cool thing all the way around. This is going to be a great time. It goes down starting at 4 p.m. It includes tickets to the Braves game, DawgNation giveaways. This is going to be a great, great time, and there's a little bit of space left. For those of you who've already gotten your tickets, I can't wait to see you there. For those of you who've dragged your feet, I'm telling you right now, if you want to be a part of it, all of our tickets are about to be gone, and after that, there's nothing I can do. Braves.com/DawgNation, Braves.com/DawgNation, or if you have a specific question about something, you can send an email, info@DawgNation.com, and you can get all the information that you need. Hopefully that's clear. Hit me up if you've got some questions. Some of you reached out on Twitter as well, @DawgNation Daily, and I'll do everything I can to help you because I want to see as many of you as I can. It's going to be a huge crowd, many of you as I can, for our big event coming up on Friday. I cannot wait for that. All right, with all of that said, there's still a lot left for us to do on the program here today, and so let's keep it rolling right now. Good stuff from him lately at DawgNation.com. A lot of energy around the Georgia program here as we head into the best parts of the summer. So let's do it all right now as a part of a Kroger Fresh Take with Connor Riley here on DawgNation Daily, presented by ESOG.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Kroger Fresh Take time with Connor Riley. And Connor, before we get into the news of the day and everything going on around Georgia football, I believe I have correct intel on this. You will be with us for DawgNation Days of Summer at Battery Atlanta and Truist Park on Friday. I am correct in saying that, right?
That is correct. I will be there in person.
Well, that's good. I'm happy to have you there. It's going to be a great time, and I've already heard from so many of you who are also planning on being there. It is going to be so much fun. Let me also begin with you where I just was. I think this Rosemy-Jacksaint thing is really fun. And, listen, short videos can sometimes be misleading, but when you pair eyewitness accounts, video proof, and by the way, if that can prove UFOs, which seems to be a thing these days, it can certainly prove the health and return to a full health of an injured Georgia wide receiver. You pair those videos with what Kirby Smart said during the spring, all of a sudden I have had to greatly upgrade my expectation for Rosemy-Jacksaint this year. I think he's a big-time prospect. The question was, how healthy would he be? Well, apparently he's healthier than I kind of assumed that he would be, and I hate to be negative about that, but I thought his injury was just really a tough thing to watch back when it happened against Florida. The point is, man, I'm really excited about the possibility given these videos you're seeing come out about him.
Yeah, a few years ago I was talking with our buddy John Stinchcomb, and it was when Ben Cleveland had his injury in the 2018 season, and it was clear that he couldn't come back and be the same player that he was pre-injury, and we were sort of discussing it, and what John had told me was, with big guys, it's those bone injuries, those ankle injuries that give you more cause than, say, like a knee injury, just because they're not that athletic and cutting all that much. With Rosemy-Jacksaint, yes, George Pickens and Dominic Blaylock have those ACL injuries. My understanding is that Rosemy-Jacksaint didn't suffer any ligament damage. It was just sort of the bone that snapped. And so once you get that repaired, it's fixed. It's not, how does it respond to that? And I think these videos that you continue to see from him are just more encouraging signs, and why, I never sold any of my Rosemy stock, but I've been quietly buying this offseason, so I appreciate you going out and saying, I just don't know when he's going to be back. Right. I've bought in a good bit of Rosemy stock. And, Georgia has an opening at that X position, and I think Rosemy-Jacksaint has a great chance of filling it in that first game against Clemson.
So whatever the opposite of a pump and dump is, that's what you're saying I did. Yeah. I'm glad to know I could have helped you out on that. I mean, here's the thing, is that, for those people who follow recruiting very closely, the one thing they're aware of is if you want to go back a few years ago, Georgia was obviously cleaning house at most position groups in recruiting, but the wide receiver position, unfortunately, for whatever reason, just kind of lagged behind on that. Georgia was not recruiting the receiver spot the same way it was recruiting other places. From 2019 on, that has kind of changed, and that's without even considering the fact that Adonai Mitchell may be a way better player than his recruiting profile would have suggested. Let's not even count that for a moment, because that's obviously to be determined. But when you sign, Blaylock and Pickens from the class of 2019, Pickens a 5-star, Blaylock essentially knocking on the door of being a 5-star was for much of that cycle, and then 2 more top 10 receivers for the class of 2020, and Rosemy-Jacksaint and Arian Smith. Obviously, Jermaine Burton, very, very close to being that same level of player there as well, measurably very close to all of that. All of a sudden now, Georgia's not recruiting receivers at a level too far below these programs that we think of always having great receivers. And in fact, I hate to do this off the top of my head because I might prove myself wrong on this, but if you put a list of the recruiting rankings, and I realize that's not the end-all be-all, I totally understand that, but it's actually a fairly, safe place to start a conversation like this. If you made a list of the recruiting credentials of the current Alabama receivers, the recruiting credentials of the current UGA receivers, I don't think you'd see some huge gap in favor of Alabama on that necessarily. All of a sudden now the measurable talent, assuming these guys come back healthy again, the measurable talent in the Georgia receiving room has been dramatically upgraded over the course of the last, I would say, 3 recruiting cycles.
Right. I think you look at some of these past recruiting cycles, and yes, Ohio State and Alabama, they get like 3 top 50 receivers in multiple classes. They're going to continue to do that because of the way they've been able to develop and put those guys into the league. So if Georgia's able to continue to develop George Pickens and they're continue to able to develop Jermaine Burton and Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, that's going to help make recruiting future wide receivers even easier. And so when you see Jermaine Burton have the success he did as a freshman, when you see Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, obviously prior to the injury, but getting out there as a freshman, starting and making plays, and then if he has a big year this year, Georgia can point to, hey, we had a couple guys in that big 20 signing class that were able to come in and play right away, even though we had somewhat started to recruit better at that position. And it's just going to become easier and easier to pitch to these wide receiver prospects, which Georgia still needs, because you look at, and obviously Alabama, LSU, the last couple national championship winners, they all have a bunch of great things. But difference-making wide receivers is probably the one big thing that Georgia you can most easily point to. I mean, maybe quarterback as well, but wide receiver more specifically is the one position you could have pointed to that says, those guys have dudes. Georgia does not or has not had dudes at that position. And if the Bulldogs are able to develop those guys, I think that's going to make the wide receiver position no longer a question.
And I guess my takeaway in all of this is, and after this we'll change the subject and talk about something different, is let's say for some reason it doesn't work out and Georgia doesn't have a dynamic offense this year. I mean,
oh boy,
it would not be a pleasant offseason. But let's say it just kind of finishes below expectations for whatever reason. Like the one thing I don't think you can say is, well, you just got to start going out and recruiting better receivers. That has actually happened the last couple of years. I mean, Georgia has recruited at the top end of the receiver position for what you could expect, given the fact that you don't have a whole lot to show these guys in terms of how they could be used in your offense. Georgia's probably actually exceeded expectations in terms of what they have to kind of demonstrate and showcase on the field. So if something goes wrong, I don't think you can point to wide receiver recruiting as the reason why it went wrong, assuming some of these guys are truly healthy, Blaylock included, who we hope to hear more good news on as you go through the summer. If these guys are healthy, then you have to say Georgia's recruited well enough to have good receivers.
Yeah, I don't think talent should be the issue at wide receiver this year. Obviously, health has so far proven to be that, with obviously Aaron Smith having a sprained wrist in the spring game, Jermaine Burton missing because of a hyperextended knee. That stuff does give you pause. But if those guys are healthy and able to play over the course of the season, then I don't think talent is going to be an issue at this wide receiver spot, certainly like it was in 2019. And that's, I think, really going to make this Georgia team all that much better.
So I'm not an X's and O's expert as we change the subject here. I bring on people to hopefully provide some of that. A couple of years ago, we brought on Chuck Smith in the show. Chuck Smith, of course, former Atlanta Falcons, pass rusher, a guy who coaches and teaches pass rushing to next generation type guys right now. And one of the things he challenged Georgia on when we brought him on the show, this is, I guess, his most recent appearance, a year or so ago, was to construct an identity for the program that made pass rush a priority. I thought Chuck's words in this were really, really strong. And I don't think there's any doubt. I'm not saying they did this because Chuck Smith said that. I'm just saying they have done this since Chuck Smith said what he said on our show. I don't think there's any doubt that the identity of the Georgia defense has become a lot more about pass rush. I gave you the numbers a little earlier in the show. 2018 to 2019 to a shorter, tougher schedule in 2020, Georgia clearly has gotten better at the pass rush spot. And when you start thinking about what Adam Anderson said off the top of our show, I know you've written about Nolan Smith. I want to get more into what you wrote about at DawgNation.com. My expectation for both those guys and Trayvon Walker, anybody you want to include in this conversation, it goes beyond just the fact that I believe them to be talented football players. I believe they now play in a defense that is willing to be more aggressive than maybe Georgia defenses were willing to be in, say, 2017, 2018. Good defenses, statistically speaking, but careful defenses. I think this defense ready to break some stuff, and I really am excited about that.
So I think most of us would probably agree that on the surface, the 2020 season was an unsuccessful one for Georgia, just given the loss to Alabama, the loss to Florida, more specifically the way that those losses played out. But I think from a schematic standpoint, and one of the constant criticisms of Kirby Smart is, he only wants to win his way, and he's not shown the willingness to adapt to a modern game. I think what I saw in the 2020 season saw that Georgia was willing to adapt and play the way that Alabama, that Clemson have in recent seasons, because you saw the wide receivers getting open downfield. Unfortunately, in the first half of the year, those throws just could not be made. And on the defensive side of the ball, I mean, that Alabama game more crystal clearly showed, hey, this idea that you're going to make teams drive on you and that's how you're going to get beat, or that's how they're going to have success, that's just not the case anymore. You need to be able to create negative plays to get the ball back to your offense so they can score more quickly. And I do think we saw a sort of sea change in that from Georgia a season ago. Obviously, there's still some tweaks to be made in terms of best optimizing that. Of the 32 sacks they had a season ago, only 4 of them came from people we consider defensive linemen. I think that number has to be higher going forward. But with the pass rush in particular, again, 40 sacks is a number you and I had talked about for a long time. Yeah. And now, given obviously the talent that Georgia's always had in the room, now that they sort of seem to be meshing the schematic styling to get there, I think there's a good chance you see that number. They would have gotten it last year in a 13-game schedule. I think there's a chance you see it this year with a regular schedule. You
wrote about Nolan Smith today at DawgNation.com. I hope everybody will read it. It's good stuff. But give us a little bit of a thumbnail of kind of where you see Nolan fitting into this discussion right now.
Are you familiar with Jay-Z?
I am a little bit.
Have you? This is off my beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, a Kanye West album. But he asked, "Would you rather be overpaid or underrated?"
Oh, that's a good question. I think I'd rather be overpaid.
I think that is the correct answer. And you know, I saw Adam Anderson's tweet as well about being overlooked, and sort of. And I think I like to think I have a good reading of where the Georgia fan base is and what they think of certain players. And it's interesting to me that I think a lot of people are really high on Adam Anderson, rightfully so, after I think what he showed in terms of coming off the edge last season. I think a lot of people are really high on Trayvon Walker, just given the obvious athletic gifts that he has. I'm not necessarily getting that same sense on Nolan Smith.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me because I know people say they want to see him have more sacks than he has in the first 2 seasons. But it's not like he was playing behind some Kwame Brown at outside linebacker. Azeez Ojulari led the league in sacks last season, and he's going to have a bigger opportunity to do this. And when he has been called upon, he does have 5 sacks over the last 2 seasons, and that's second on the team in terms of players that are going to be on Georgia's defense this year. So with Nolan, and I think the talent and the skills are there. I just think the biggest thing for him is he hasn't had an opportunity to fully showcase that. And, you know, Trayvon Walker seems to be getting the benefit of the doubt there because he's coming in and replacing Malik Herring. But I think because Nolan had that number 1 overall player in the country designation coming in, there's been this higher expectation of him. And because Azeez Ojulari was as great, and I mean that word specifically, great as he was last season, it's sort of prevented Nolan Smith from getting those reps needed to be that impact pass rusher that I think he still can be.
Yeah, I mean, Azeez Ojulari, I think right now ranks as in the kind of upper tier of players that Kirby Smart has coached. And so the idea that you're going to easily surpass Ojulari for playing time, that's just not a very easy thing to do because Ojulari did so much well for Georgia. As I said before, he would rank near the top of the players that Smart has coached in his early days as UGA coach. But that said, the conversation around Smith amongst fans is always, I think, very interesting. You know, I monitor a lot of what goes on during the games in our DawgNation forum, and one of the very common questions you get in the DawgNation forum is, where is Nolan Smith? I think there are a lot of fans who assume that Smith actually plays less than he actually does because the stats maybe aren't quite as prolific as you would have expected them to be for a guy, you know, that does have the credentials that Smith has. And I think the absence of those stats have left some fans to maybe assume that Smith is a disappointment. But I don't get the impression the Georgia coaches, at least to this point in time in his Georgia career, I don't get the impression the Georgia coaches necessarily feel that way.
I don't either. And Nolan Smith is going to be a leader on this Georgia defense this year. He might not be like the Nakobe Smith true alpha, but he's a guy that we're going to hear from a lot, and I think is going to make a lot of plays. And one thing, at least from my watching of Nolan Smith, I don't know if there's a player who has more 1-yard tackles, especially from like a pass rushing standpoint, than Nolan Smith. He may not be able to get to the quarterback in the backfield, but he'll bring him down as like the quarterback tries to step up in the pocket and try and take off there. And so if he can turn a few more of those into actual sacks and say that number goes from 5 to 8 or this coming season where he had 2.5 last year, if he can get to like 6 this season, that's going to be huge for this Georgia pass rush because, again, Georgia doesn't. I don't believe Georgia needs a true dominant stud pass rusher, say like Jarvis Jones was, because they're going to be able to get enough from Adam Anderson, Trayvon Walker, I think potentially Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, and obviously Nolan Smith as well to have an incredibly formidable pass rush.
It's almost like a Clavon Chason type number, like around 10 sacks, something along those lines. Or that was close to what Chason has last year at LSU. But you know, you don't have to have a lead guy have 17 sacks. You can have a big pass rush with a lot of guys contributing to the ensemble. However, I will say this, that while I think that Nolan Smith's first couple of years on campus have been fine, I don't think the Georgia coaches would probably have much of a problem with that. I do think because he does have that 1 next to his name, former number 1 recruit, that there is a little bit more pressure on him to have a great season this year than even someone like Adam Anderson, who was also an elite recruit, and Anderson would be the highest-rated recruit on most of the teams in the country. But there's a little extra pressure that Nolan carries into this upcoming season that I don't think that Anderson quite has, despite Anderson also being an elite recruit, because Nolan was number 1. Nolan was a very charismatic figure on the recruiting trail, which
a leader.
In this case kind of works maybe against him a little bit because that adds even more attention attention to him. So I think Nolan's been fine for his first couple of years. I think he's going to play very well this year. I have big expectations. But unfortunately, those expectations are on his shoulders going into the season.
The reason I'm not at all concerned about Nolan Smith and why I believe he's going to have a big year is in the 2 years that we've gotten to know him, at least on campus, and having Georgia coaches talk about him, the first thing they always mention about Nolan is his
work ethic. I don't know.
Work ethic, motor.
Okay, yeah.
I was going to go with that. Good. Paying attention. And so because of that, I don't think this is going to be like a Brenton Cox situation where, he gets a little sour and then sort of spirals from there. I think Nolan is going to be a guy that's going to continue to work hard and really make an impact on this Georgia defense in 2021.
All right, I want to ask you about the big news, what I think at least the big news of the week, the Brandon Turnage transfer. We'll do that here coming up. Let me remind you that it's our Kroger Fresh Take here with Connor Riley. And, of course, this time of year, heading towards those graduations, and Kroger is getting you set up for everything you do as you celebrate the graduate in your life, whether it be those party platters or the flowers, balloons for the parties, or the perfect gift, like a gift card, even the greeting card stuff. All of that available at your local Kroger. You can go to Kroger.com/graduation and learn a lot more about that. Kroger.com/graduation. Or just stop by and see the Kroger closest to you. I can promise you they'll take really good care of you and the graduate in your life as we head towards this, I think, really fun time of year. Georgia did get some big news in the person of Brandon Turnage, former four-star signee in Alabama's 2019 class out of Oxford, Mississippi, spurning the hometown Ole Miss Rebels to go to Alabama. Arrives to Georgia, having not played a ton at Alabama for a couple of reasons, but pretty clearly, from a recruiting standpoint, fitting right into a defensive secondary that has a lot of talent. Connor, I don't want to completely restate everything I've said, on this yesterday, but I celebrate this more as a Georgia fan, a big recruiting win more so than the typical transfer news. I don't view Turnage as necessarily plug and play the way I would have viewed Tyke Smith being that, but the Georgia roster is clearly better in my mind with Turnage on it. What's your take on all of this?
At the minimum, he feels like a major Burns replacement. The fact that Burns obviously enters the portal, sounds like LSU is the most likely landing spot for him. So what do? They go out, they get a guy who has played in an SEC program, and if you can make it at Alabama, you can make it anywhere. I'm sure Frank Sinatra's rolling over in his grave when he hears that. And so because of that, at the very least, you add another depth piece to this Georgia team in 2021. Now, I think the biggest question with Turnage, and the thing I'm most interested in, is coming out of high school, he was recruited or at least listed as a cornerback prospect. Can he play cornerback for Georgia in 2021? Because I think that's the best chance he has at playing the field. And as Kirby Smart has said, they're going to try everyone out there at that cornerback position in hopes of finding guys that can go out there and play. Unfortunately, he doesn't have the experience I think that Georgia is looking for, which is why I think, once again, they could go into the portal.
Yeah.
I know you're going to continue to try and speak Darian Kendrick into existence here, but at the very least, he adds to that depth in the secondary, makes you feel a lot better in terms of potential injury, because if, say, a Chris Smith or a Lewis Seen goes down, you do feel a lot better than having to turn to, say, a freshman in David Daniel.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, as I said before, you give me the choice of the Georgia roster and it doesn't have Brandon Turnage on it, or the Georgia roster and it does have Brandon Turnage, I'll clearly take the option that includes him, because this is a player good enough to play at the SEC level. It's just a matter of learning him up, teaching him, and getting him ready to, actually be on the field. He's been through practice at Alabama, similar defensive scheme, so that's all good. It's just a matter of taking that next step and being on the field. So I'm glad that Georgia has him. But as you said before, this is not a Darian Kendrick situation. I know that Kendrick's got a little bit of, baggage right now, and you have to sort of wait and figure out what all that's about, and I won't pretend to know. But if Kendrick comes here, he's starter day one. With all due respect to the guys on the Georgia roster, Kendrick, his potential first-round pick. This is a former, all-conference, cornerback. That's a guy you would expect to come in and win a starting job. Tyke Smith, given the way that he played a year ago, given the fact that he's got some draft credentials too, that's a guy that I expect to, barring injury or something like that, I expect to be a starter day one. Turnage, from a recruiting standpoint, compares very, very closely to a guy like Jalen Kimber. They are similar, recruiting numbers, just different years. But that doesn't mean that you sort of slide in and start right away. If anything else, he's just a part of a competition that includes Kimber and Keely Ringo and all of those guys. So I guess my assumption is that Georgia's still not quite done looking for those transferred defensive backs. May not get one because some of this kind of stuff is not completely in Georgia's control. But this does not preclude Georgia from looking at more defensive backs.
No, not in the slightest. And I think one of the things that this, to me, the bigger signal here about Georgia going out, bringing in a transfer in Brandon Turnage coming from Alabama. One, I absolutely expect the SEC to overturn their interconference transfer rule. The Pac-12 did theirs yesterday. I know there's a meeting on June 3rd where the SEC presidents will vote on that. My expectation is that'll be changed. The other thing that this sort of signals to me is when Georgia's gone out and added transfers in the past, and we have Kirby Smart on record as saying this, it's been need-based. Now, you can make an argument, yes, depth in the secondary was certainly a need. But going out and getting a guy like a Brandon Turnage who hasn't played a whole lot and you don't know what the expectation for him even playing this season is going to be, is that Georgia's pretty clearly changing the way they view the transfer portal. And going forward, they're going to say, all right, if we see a quality player out there that we think can help us, maybe not this season, but down the line, we're no longer going to hesitate to try and bring him in. And I know Kirby Smart still wants to, appeal to high school recruits the most because I think that's the easiest way to build up your program. That's how Alabama and Ohio State are still going to continue to operate. But the fact that Kirby Smart went out and was proactive in getting a guy who might not see the field a whole lot in this coming season, I think is very interesting. It says a lot to me about the future usage of the transfer portal when it comes to Georgia football.
Yeah, without getting too deep in the weeds, when it comes to the NFL draft or really NBA draft or anything like that, I'm a big believer in best player available. That if you draft for need, all you're going to do is create more needs.
Yep.
That if you take a good player every time you draft, regardless of position, eventually you have a roster filled with good players. Yeah. That's always a better alternative than the other alternative there. So the idea that, hey, he may not solve our immediate need, but a year from now we'll be glad to have a former top 100 recruit in a top 10 cornerback in our defensive back room, then obviously you kind of go out there and do that. Let me just say this real quick, though, before we move one final thing. So we have also done Mike Woods is in the transfer portal, or Xavier Worthy's in the transfer portal, or I don't even know who else. Jamison Williams. Because you're hearing good things about Rosemary Jackson, because Adonai Mitchell looks like he can play the game based on what you saw at G-Day, does that now make you less interested if you're Georgia in the next Jamison Williams that pops in the transfer portal? And if it's Julian Fleming, that's going to be a different story. But
I love it. He's just the highest rated receiver we've seen in a while.
Well, he hasn't. I mean, I'm obviously joking. I'm just saying that because there's no rumor about that. I got to be careful how I say things. But he just hasn't played much at Ohio State. That's the reason why I said that. There's no rumors out there about that. But the point is, does the fact that you have some of these receivers kind of maybe coming along here a little bit, does that make you, I guess, less interested in whatever the next Mike Woods, Jamison Williams type guy would be?
A little bit. I think one thing to keep in mind here, and maybe this is just anecdotal, it's a one-season thing, but Georgia's pretty clearly proven that they can develop defensive backs into NFL players. And so because of that, it's going to make them very appealing to high school recruits. And you're seeing that in this 2022 cycle, as I try to do the math there off the top of my head. Malachi Starks, 5-star athlete, probably going to play in the defensive backfield for Georgia. Bulldogs in very good standing with Kamari Wilson. Traquan Fagans out of Alabama is another highly rated cornerback. Georgia is in good standing with there. They can absolutely go into any defensive backs living room in the country and absolutely appeal to them and say, Georgia's a place where we can put you in the NFL. Georgia hasn't really been able to say that to the same level of success at the wide receiver position. So because of that, I think they really want to continue to develop the guys that they've recruited into NFL players before they necessarily go out and start trying to add guys through the transfer portal there, because ultimately your ability to continue to develop high school recruits is going to be what makes you a successful program. That's why Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson traditionally don't rely a whole lot on transfers.
Let me squeeze in one more thing, and we've gone a little long here, but I want to squeeze this in. Georgia releasing some video, and this is the first video I've seen. Maybe there's been other video, I've just missed it, of the new building that has kind of, I think, just opened. It's weird to me how quiet all of this has been. I don't know, like when the West End Zone facility opened up, boy, there was all kinds of chatter about that. It was, of course, pre-pandemic, so maybe that makes a big difference here. But we'll show you some of this office space that Georgia's going to put on display here. Are you with me, Connor, that this has been kind of weirdly quiet? And I don't really know. I don't have an opinion as to why. It just kind of seems like we haven't made as much noise about this as I sort of assumed that we would.
So I think, and again, this is maybe just a hypothesis, I think you are correct in the lack of bigger news or more videos about this new football facility is a little suspicious. I'll be really interested to see how much this building in its totality is highlighted in the month of June when recruits are allowed back on campus. And maybe they're, trying to keep it, muddled and quiet until they can really showcase and wow that first wave of visitors that come in the month of June to show them, hey, this is our brand spanking new facility. You're getting the first look at it. We haven't, teased this on social media. We haven't let those reporters come in here and look around and inspect and whatnot. And so I think if it's not as hyped in the month of June as it has been, as I expect it to be, then I think I'll be even more suspicious about the status of this building.
I wouldn't even begin to even speculate as to what's going on here, but normally in these college programs, when they build a new building, there's just like this, unbelievable, it's like, parades and ceremonies. Yeah. And this one just doesn't quite have that same level of buzz right now.
And part of it, too, it is a football-only facility, and so that might not have a ton of public appeal, but traditionally, we put a new door on today. Yeah. Let's throw up a social media video.
Exactly, yeah.
So because I think maybe the lack of that, I do think you're right in bringing up the fact that the lack of something more granular is a little interesting if you follow this stuff closely.
Yeah, so maybe some of us follow this stuff closer than we should. But that is out there and kind of interesting all the way around. Connor, good stuff. Thanks for being here as part of our Kroger Fresh Take. We'll look forward to reading a bunch more from you at DawgNation.com. And, of course, talking to you very soon there again as well.
Yep, look forward to seeing you people on Friday at the Braves event.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
All right, really good stuff from Connor Riley all the way around. And speaking of really good stuff, you've heard me tell you about the Finnish long drink before. Y'all, you got to try this. My wife was enjoying some last night. We, off the top of the show, we had baseball last night. That's, some of these spring nights, like the greatest thing in the world, but they're also long, right? And so you come home, you want to relax, and you kind of put a cap on a long day. And the Finnish long drink's just a great way for us to be able to do that in our household. It comes, as the name might suggest, from Finland. Kind of first originated around the Summer Games when they were in Helsinki, like back in the 1950s. It's actually kind of a really cool story about how it ended up in the United States and kind of how big of a deal it's been in Finland for such a long time. And once again, hearing this weekend, I think it was actually our buddy Connor Riley who part of some of the graduation festivities there in the University of Georgia. Those bars in Athens, everybody enjoying that Finnish long drink. The reason why is because it comes ready to drink right out of the can. In other words, you get great flavor. You don't have to do anything to it. Just open it and start drinking it. Got a liquor kick, got the citrus flavor of the original. There's a cranberry version. There's also a long drink zero, which obviously includes 0 calories, 0 carbs. Really good stuff. There's a stronger version that has 8.5% alcohol by volume that comes in the black can. So there's all kinds of really cool choices for you, whichever one you think you might like. I think I promise you will. And the next step for you is to kind of find some, try it yourself, understand why so many folks are so ready to make this a huge part of their spring and summer plans. It comes ready to drink right out of the can. It tastes great. Got a liquor kick, all kinds of great flavor. TheLongDrink.com is the website. If you go to the website, TheLongDrink.com, you can find out, which stores are selling it, where you can go to get it, which bars have it. This is a fun thing. We're going to be doing a lot of stuff with the Finnish long drink as we head towards the spring and the summer, and I can't wait to tell you more about that. But for now, just go to TheLongDrink.com and find out where you can get some yourself here today. All right, let's do our SEC through here for a moment. So let me now bring the show to a screeching halt and just slam on the brakes from what has otherwise been a pretty fun discussion. Georgia basketball, a little bit of a disappointing, I guess, at this point, who even really knows. But Severe Wheeler has announced his new college home, and he's going to the University of Kentucky. And, obviously, Wheeler staying in the SEC, now playing against Georgia this upcoming year. You see the way in which the Wildcats are happy to have Wheeler on the roster. It obviously just kind of brings back to mind an unpleasant conversation for Georgia fans, which is the number of transfers that have exited out of the program. And you got Katie Johnson getting close to announcing his new home there as well. And so it's just been kind of an unpleasant conversation. Now, on the flip side of this, Jeff Goodman, a longtime college basketball reporter, had some news yesterday on Twitter that Georgia might be in the mix for some interesting additions to the program here. So there is potentially some good news to come for Georgia basketball before, the upcoming season. But seeing Wheeler staying in the SEC to go to a place like Kentucky, that's a little bit of a deflating piece of news. And for Georgia fans trying to figure out what's what for the Dogs in this new transfer portal world, that is obviously a little bit of a challenging piece of news all the way around. Back to the world of college football here for a moment. South Carolina announcing yesterday. Actually, I guess both schools announced it. But UNC and South Carolina are going to do a home and home. Now, these two programs, those kind of two big state schools in the Carolinas, have actually played a lot in recent years. A lot of times these games are in Charlotte where Georgia's going to play Clemson this year. But this is a home and home for 28-28 and 2029. My reason for bringing this up is I'm very interested to see what the North Carolina program looks like in 2028. If you follow college football recruiting pretty closely, I think one of the things you would say is a pretty unmissable recent trend is the way in which North Carolina has become a big factor in recruiting. I mean, Mac Brown, since becoming UNC coach, has had some recruiting wins, and they are in play for some big names for the class of 2022 as well. I mean, they're one of the schools that might be battling a school like Georgia for, defensive tackle Travis Shaw, as for instance. And, you just sort of see UNC showing up in some of these big recruitments in a way you did not in the past. This is a big state school. They got a lot of pedigree, a lot of history. UNC, I should say the state of North Carolina has, pretty decent high school football, so you're able to kind of lean on some in-state connections there. Obviously, Mac Brown will not be coaching the Tar Heels, at least that's my assumption, in 2028. But what does he leave there in Chapel Hill? And for an ACC that is desperate for a team other than Clemson to kind of show up and have some permanence to it, year-over-year success, boy, it'll be interesting to see what UNC becomes by then and how much of a thorn in the side of other SEC teams are they in recruiting. I think that's kind of an interesting story worth watching. UNC and South Carolina getting ready to renew their series there. And then really quickly, let me just do this to kind of wrap things up here for SEC through. I thought that Dennis Dodd had a very interesting column at CBSSports.com talking about the way the transfer portal and things like that are causing coaches to have to rethink their roster management skills. And a couple of the coaches that were quoted, Jake Spavital, who I believe now is the head coach at Texas State, I believe, and the new head coach after Mike Norvell at Memphis. And one of the things that both these guys were saying, and I just think we've got to pay close attention to this, that I think the people who have pushed transfer portal on us are doing it for what they believe are the right reasons. I think they want to do right by players, and I have respect for that. And I believe they genuinely believe that increasing the freedoms that players enjoy is the way to do right by players. But I still want to say, let's just be really careful to measure what actually happens because of this. We told you last year of the class of 2021, there were like 100 and something fewer players that signed scholarships last year than the year before. And you can say, well, pandemic impacted that and super senior extra eligibility impacted that. Maybe that it did. But both Spavital and the coach at Memphis in the CBS Sports article were both essentially saying they are now recruiting fewer high school kids because of the transfer portal. Because when you bring in a high school kid, you don't know if he's good or not. The kid that's transferring somewhere else, at least you have an idea of what he brings to the table. In the long run, that may be good for a player who gets a chance to transfer, but that is not good for college football overall. If you have, or I should say, it's not good for the players who want to play college football to have fewer opportunities available for them. And I think that is not getting enough attention here. There are currently 2,500 names in the football transfer portal. There are about 2,000 getting close to that in the basketball transfer portal. There are only a couple of hundred roster spots even available. So we've created this transfer portal economy where the coaches, the programs get to be very selective who they bring in. Most of the players in that have nowhere to go. But as the transfer guys move around, that also creates less opportunity for high school players there as well. Now, you can listen to me say all this and say, well, BA, you're just an old head. You're trying to fight for tradition. You're trying to, keep college football the way that it is. You're trying to resist change too much. Don't take my word for it. Do your own research. Look into this. See the ways in which these radical changes that are being pushed on college sports are affecting the sport. Decide for yourself, are these changes for the better or for the worse? I'll let you do that for yourself, and you can tell me what you figure out there. We'll make that our SEC through. But before we wrap up here today, let me also send a quick hello to my friends at Merriweather and Tharp. I had a great lunch today with Bob Tharp, partner over there at Merriweather and Tharp. They are doing so many great things right now, and it is great to see the impact they're having on the community because, let's face it, The divorce process is a real factor, a real thing that some of you, unfortunately, are going to have to deal with. But if you do go through it, you want somebody strong on your side who knows the law, the intricacies of all the decisions that have to be made there, someone who can make you feel whole again, restore your family relationships, your finances, all that kind of stuff to set you up for a next season, next chapter of life. It's more enjoyable than the one that you have currently been in. And that is what Meriwether and Tharp can do. They are your source for Georgia divorce. So find them online, theatlantadivorceteam.com. That website, once again, theatlantadivorceteam.com. That will get you in touch with my friends at Meriwether and Tharp. And as we wrap up here today on this program, let's do so with some fun. Of course, our Gator Hater roll call. Love seeing how many of you are like me in your distaste for those lousy, stinking Gators. And, of course, one of the ways we do that is by honoring someone as our golden shoe winner on the show each and every day. Of course, that's the trophy that we have to offer around here. Our buddy Mad Dog steps back up to the plate, wins this thing again. Very, very funny photo here. I believe that's Bill Goldberg that Kirby Smart's head is photoshopped onto there, kind of choking out a gator. I like to see that all the way around. He says, Mad Dog says on Twitter, when you practice gator wrestling to prepare for October 30th, yeah, it's going to be here before you know it, and can't wait to see Kirby Smart doing some of that kind of stuff in real life then. By the way, speaking of October 30th, now just 160, how many days? 65 days away. 165 days away. It's our Gator Hater countdown. We will see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. We'll talk to you then, everybody. And on video, time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down. You can find R.S. Andrews online at rsandrews.com. They'll take care of you for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. They'll take good care of you today, so make sure you find them online. All right, I'm going to dive over here on Facebook first, and we'll take some comments over there. We'll do some YouTube stuff there too, and then we'll get on our merry way here today. I hope all of you are doing great. Chad Buchanan giving you a go, you silver britches. So it's always been one of my favorite Georgia things to say, go, you silver britches. First of all, I think silver britches as a phrase, just a great phrase. But my grandfather, who was the first person to ever take me to a Georgia game, my dad's dad, he had like one of these old pickup trucks. And on the back, he had the go, you silver britches bumper sticker. Let me tell you something. I'd give anything for one of those. I don't have one of those bumper stickers now, but I'd give anything for one of those. So if you want to know how a guy like me ends up doing a show like this, the fact that my grandfather had a Go You Silver Britches bumper sticker on his old 70-something pickup, that's a pretty good hint on all of that. Gerald Harmon says it's easier, talking about the transfer portal, for a kid to go to Georgia to Florida International than vice versa. That's what these kids need to consider before getting the transfer portal. That's exactly right. I mean, one of the coaches in this Dennis Dodd article flat out said they will not take Group of 5 transfers. I mean, he said that we've done the research on this, just not worth the trouble. And I hate to say that so bluntly, but that's exactly what the guy said, that they're just not interested in Group of 5 transfers. That, you do see, as you say, higher level guy going to the lower level. You may occasionally see that with quarterback stuff from time to time. Didn't Oregon bring in a Group of 5 quarterback or an FCS quarterback a couple years ago, I think? You may occasionally see that with quarterbacks. You're not going to see that much, maybe with some of the other positions that are out there. And, I think the thing that we have to kind of, forget is that we talk about a school in Georgia on this show that's recruiting at such a different level than almost everybody else, even in the Power 5. Frankly, the majority of the SEC doesn't even recruit in the same stratosphere that Georgia does. So Georgia's literally selecting between, in most cases, like 50 to 100 guys. And that's really about all Georgia's even really considering when you get down to it is, somewhere between 50, 60, 70, 100 players. And Georgia just does not go much below that number in terms of filling its roster needs. And Alabama's the same way. Right now, Clemson's the same way. LSU's kind of that way. You guys know who the teams are that are kind of in the luxurious spot of being able to be that selective. Most of the country is not like that. Most of the country is just trying to do whatever they can to kind of find, players who are good enough to play. And, frankly, I know a lot of parents. I know a lot of, families who would love nothing more than to see their kid, whether it be football, softball, baseball, basketball, whatever else, get a chance to play Division I sports. You know how I think about this sometimes. Remember how the former actresses in California end up going to prison because they were trying to get their kids in like a fancy school or whatever else? Like down here, our version of that is Division I sports. So many parents that I've either met over my life or maybe know right now would just spend anything, do anything. They want that prestige of being able to say, hey, my son or daughter's a D1 athlete. That's what they want so badly for their children. And in the case of football right now, at least to a certain degree, there are fewer of those opportunities to go around because coaches have found a little bit of a honey hole when it comes to this transfer portal at the moment. Isaac Cruz, there is no time yet for Georgia Clemson. There is no time yet for that. But I'm guessing by mid-June we should have that. There's normally like that moment early in the summer where ESPN dumps like the first 3 weeks worth of games on us. And my guess is they'll do a big thing. I did not do what I was going to do on the show today. I told you all yesterday I was going to do this, and we just had too much else we had to do. But tomorrow I'm going to do a thing. There's this guy on Twitter that says he thinks that Georgia Clemson, I'm saying this to Connor off camera here, maybe the biggest season opener of all time. And we're going to try to do a little research to see if we can kind of figure out where that might rank in terms of all-time games.
I believe the lowest combined AP ranking for the first game is 4, when number 1 Alabama played number 3 Florida State to open the 2017 season.
That's
I
good.
believe.
Yeah, that's good. And unfortunately, I guess DeAndre Francois ended up getting hurt in
Broke
Florida
his
State.
ankle in that game, and that sunk Florida State season.
Yeah, but that's really good. So we're going to do some stuff on that. We'll look at some of the historic Georgia season openers. So we're going to try to do some fun stuff on that. So the bottom line is, go back to the commenters' question. When ESPN announces the game time for this, they're going to do it with a lot of fanfare, I'm assuming anyway, but we'll probably have to wait till like mid-June or so to do that. Let me see. I believe I got some big news here in the comment section. Let me see if I can find this. Okay, yeah. Hugh Nash says, how about a shout out to my daughter Reagan, who graduated from high school this weekend and plans to attend Swanee next year. So proud of her. That's really cool. First of all, Swanee, very nice school. Former SEC program, by the way. I'm right about that, right? Swanee was in the SEC, right? Very, very nice school. And congratulations on a wonderful high school graduation. I love this time of year. I am just kind of a sentimental idiot. I mean, I just... that kind of stuff just hits me in the feels. So I am proud for all the graduates. Hugh, especially your daughter. What a great, great moment she has ahead of her, going to a great school and all kinds of great fun. Brandon Griffin says, where's the victory party going to be after the game in Charlotte? You better believe there's going to be a big one. And DawgNation is going to be a huge part of all of that. Can't wait to tell you about that. Let's get through DawgNation Days of Summer first, then we'll tell you about some big, big stuff coming up this fall. Although I'm not really supposed to be saying that. What else? By the way, Neil Calvino says people are going to be going to Lake Hartwell and shooting fireworks. That'd be a pretty good victory party for sure. What else? Mike Little says, which game do you think gives Georgia the biggest problem? Yeah, obviously Clemson. Then after that, you start thinking about, Florida beyond that. And really, listen, anybody can kind of rise up and surprise you, but this is as manageable as schedules I think you can see Georgia play, really, for the most part. Keith Finney says, when am I leaving for ESPN? I've got no plans to go anywhere. I got the best job in the world. No plans for me to go anywhere. Matt Rugavina says, how great will it be to see full crowds that college game day? Yeah, it's going to be amazing. I mean, there's just something different. I told you this the other day. It's like, you can do a lot, try to fill the space, but there is something about a real crowd making real noise that just cannot be recreated. And of all the stuff that has been miserable and awful and just hard to endure through all of this, I think one of the actually kind of cool things to come out of what we've been through over the last year and a half is the realization of how valuable fans are. That I think there was this thought that we were heading to this thing in sports where, especially like at the NFL level, where it seems like so much of that sport is about the TV viewing experience, that these games themselves were nothing more than a TV product, and the fans were just secondary to it. But I mean, I think one of the big reasons why almost across the board you've seen TV ratings go down in sports, college football included, by the way, is because I think the absence of fans made the events not feel real. And when you bring these fans back, you make the games feel real. I've been lucky enough to be at Truist Park for a couple of these Braves games with bigger crowds. It just feels great. It just feels great. You know, the experience you get watching a golf tournament. You're going to have a PGA championship this weekend at Kiawah Island, the beautiful ocean course there. Big shots ought to be accompanied by cheers. It's the thing. You know, seeing Foley Field packed out for, Georgia and Ole Miss this weekend is going to be great. I hate to give Tennessee credit, but that checkerboard crowd they put together for their walk-off win against Arkansas, number one team in the country, I'm sorry, that was awesome. And I hate Tennessee. I don't want to give them credit for anything, but that's awesome. The presence of fans back in sports is just a great thing. And you're seeing some examples of that. All right, over here to the YouTube side of things just for a moment, and we'll see how folks are doing. Frank Patterson says, are we wearing black versus Clemson? That's a good question. We'll have to see about that. Big O, he says, talking about Darnell Washington, looks mean in the highlights. We'll have a big-time game. Boy, you talk about, the possible storylines that would get the most energy. If it's a big game for Darnell Washington against Clemson, I think that's one of the things that might generate as much buzz as anything. Obviously, Georgia fans want to see Georgia win, but you start thinking about the ways in which Georgia could win, in which people would just be over the moon. If Darnell Washington's catching multiple touchdowns, for some reason, I just think that would get people in a way that almost nothing else probably would. Unless, George Pickens, pulls is it Amari Rodgers who did that for Clemson a couple of years ago? Unless Pickens just comes running out like the Ultimate Warrior again and saves the day. Other than that, I would say Darnell would be about as big as anything. DogFan3 says almost 2 weeks away until one of the biggest recruiting weekends for UGA in recent memory. Yeah, that June stuff is going to be gigantic for the Dogs. No question about that. No question about that. Let's see what else. Mike D, I did not see that. So a Mets player got hit in the face last night? I didn't see that. That's awful to hear. I did not see that. But I do hate that. I mean, a lot of these guys, when they get hit like that, they're just never the same again. It's hard enough to step in the box as it is. And once you have experienced getting hit, some guys, it becomes very hard for them to get, just kind of develop the same mental approach again. I hate it. And it's just, unfortunately, it's easy to do. Ball can get away from you. That's scary. HR picking stuff on the subject of a ticker tape parade downtown Athens. Yeah, we talked about this before, and obviously you don't want to talk too much about it because you want to actually experience in the moment. You don't want to, get too out in front of it. But I've always kind of wondered, what a national championship celebration for Georgia would be like. Obviously, it would be in Athens, and I guess you're assuming that you'd kind of create downtown Athens as a parade route. But how do you get? So that's the thing about Athens is actually a very small town. That's on game day, you see how the population swells, but for something like that, you'd have even more people coming into town. How would you possibly take care of them all? You'd have to have a very creative parade route just to get a spot for everybody who wants to be there. It's a problem I hope one day Georgia has a chance to solve, but boy, what an interesting thing to think about. Well, let's see what else. HR Picking Stuff says James Cook is Marshall Faulk light. Boy, that's fun to think about. Nature Gator. Boy, nature, sometimes the trolls hit a little closer to home than others do. I'm not going to read that one, but sometimes they hit a little closer to home than others. G Grace giving me an LOL. I'm not sure what I said to earn that, but I'm getting an LOL. Austin Allen says the gray britches are better than the silver britches. Yeah, unfortunately, the true silver's been gone from Georgia for a while, which I'll never quite understand. I know this is kind of a tired topic, but Dallas Cowboys in the NFL, and their uniforms, I believe, are also made by Nike now. They're silver and metallic, but somehow the Georgia ones can't end up being that way. I'll never quite understand that. Let's see what else. G. Grace Boy says, be honest, North Carolina has a ways to go. A&M beat them last year, and A&M soft as marshmallow. So A&M, even missing a lot of guys off its bowl roster, did come back and get that win. That was a little bit of a setback there. But, I mean, it just seems like you see UNC a factor in some of these recruitments in a way that you haven't before. And obviously one of the biggest, quarterbacks to watch for the upcoming year is Sam Howell. I'm not saying they're going to win a national championship or anything like that anytime soon. But I would say there's going to be some attention around that UNC program, and we'll see if it lasts beyond just the little bit of success that Mac Brown seems to be enjoying right now. Robert Barnes on the subject of Darian Kendrick. Yeah, I mean, I'll have to say I don't know quite for sure where that stands. And I've said before that, on the basis of what I think I know about the situation he's been through, listen, the one thing that we are very consistent about around here is we're big on second chances. We don't condemn a lot of people very quickly. And by the way, I would say that we're consistent on that, and that we're also not looking to, cancel other teams' players either. I mean, that's just not what we do. There's this old tradition in kind of college football where, whatever your player does, you forgive it just like that. Somebody else's player, you sort of, I guess you just kind of drag them over the coals for whatever they may have done. Around here, we don't really do that. Around here, we're just kind of believers in second chances, that we are very, very slow to want to condemn someone and take college football out of their life. That's just, I don't see how anybody who's good enough to play at the high college football level has a better quality of life by taking that opportunity away from them. I just don't see that. So whether it be Darian Kendrick or anybody else we've talked about who may have kind of run afoul and gotten a little bit of trouble, I like second chances, and I kind of always will. Always will. Nature Gator says he's not a troll. Nature, I'm always glad to have you. Always glad to have you. DMart42 says he doesn't see it from Sam Howell. That's interesting. Looking at some other quarterbacks on that roster there, that's kind of interesting. Jay Harwell says when you come into Savannah, UGA lives here. That's exactly right. Yeah, I haven't been to Savannah in a couple years. I want to get DawgNation down there. So the problem is we've been kind of, locked away and not able to do anything. But doing something big in Savannah was like kind of always our plans, and then we haven't done anything anywhere. So at a certain point in time, I'd love to be back in Savannah again. Gerald Harmon says, no, there's nothing new and official for Rick Gilbert yet. I think the assumption is that he might be going back to LSU, but there's nothing new and official on that right now. That's all still out there. Let's see what else. We're going to get ready to go. Jay Harwell, yes, we are doing a game day event, although I can't tell you any more about that right now. Trey Droughty says that he thinks Darnell's going to be the number one impact player this season. Bank on it. 10 years from now, we'll talk about him like we do Herschel Walker. Boy, that's a big statement. Big statement for sure. But even if he's not quite at Herschel levels, I think he's got a great chance. I mean, I just think that, we're getting to the point now where he's just and you'd say the same about, Brock Bowers and any of the other Georgia tight ends. It's not this thing of, okay, I'm throwing to a wide receiver, now I'm throwing to a tight end. All of these guys in a Todd Monken offense just become pass catchers. And in the same way that basketball over time has gotten more positionless, sort of get the impression that football is becoming a little bit more of a positionless sport too. And all of a sudden it's not, wide receiver route or tight end route. It's, hey, let's put, our four best pass catchers on the field, let them go out there and do something. And I do think that Darnell has a very good chance of being that. And this is an example of something that I have to be candid about, that I thought that Darnell's development might be a little slower than it's actually turned out to be. I thought you might have to wait a little while to see the best of Darnell Washington. But based on the way that he played at the end of last season, I think that's actually fairly accelerated. Randy Hall, looking forward to seeing Eddie get some new props. Keith Fold says we'll never see another Herschel. I mean, here's the thing to me about Herschel Walker. And I've made this analogy before, but in baseball, there's the concept of a guy who steals bases, and there's the concept of a base stealer. And a base stealer is like a Ricky Henderson, or what Vince Coleman used to be back when I was a kid. Everybody in the ballpark knows he's stealing, and you still can't stop him. That, that big lead, back in the old days, the Busch Stadium used to have those sliding pits, it was artificial turf. So you had those sliding pits. And so you could tell how big of a lead the runner got because he was out of the sliding pit. He was standing on the green turf. And for a guy like Coleman or what Henderson used to be, various guys of kind of that era, because that was like the base stealing era. You don't steal as many bases now as you used to. But even when those guys get those big leads and you knew they were going, catcher, everybody ready to, defend against this, you still couldn't stop the base stealer. To me, Herschel Walker's much the same way. And one of the reasons why I think the greatness of Herschel, should never be obscured, and it's an absolute crime that he wasn't, listed as the greatest player of all time. Just absolute, that's literally an act of theft against his legacy, not to have him name that, a year or so ago, whenever that came out at the 150th anniversary of the sport. But when Herschel's playing, everybody knows he's getting the ball. I mean, this was not like the era of 4 wide receivers and, he's running out of like a shotgun set with like the defense spread from, pillar to post. That's not the way the world was back then. The game was more conservative. Everybody was geared up to stop the run. Everyone knew Herschel was getting it, and he still got those yards. And that's the thing I think you can't discount, the numbers that he put up, even with defenses completely 100% absolutely focused and geared on trying to stop him. That's the one thing you just can't forget. There were other running backs of that era you could say similar things about, but none better than Herschel. Let's see what else. Jordan Bowman, who's a Clemson fan on the subject of Darian Kendrick, says he was always a respectful person, worked hard, played for his teammates, recruited to play wide receiver, and was the first to volunteer to switch defensive back when we needed him. So there you go. That's a ringing endorsement from Jordan Bowman. That's enough for me. That's enough for me on that. Let's see what else. One or two more, we got to go. We really do have to go. Appreciate all of you being here. Always fun conversations. Good to see Thomas Tyson checking in over here. Jay Shipes, of course, there too. So we're going to get ready to wrap up. Fun stuff. Thank you all for being here. Don't forget, Braves.com/DawgNation. A couple more tickets left for you to get. Hope you can be there for that. By tomorrow, they may be gone. So y'all get in there and get them while you can. And we'll look forward to seeing all of you going to be there with us on Friday. Also, big thanks to our friends at R.S. Andrews, making the R.S. Andrews cool down possible. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. They'll show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. You can find them there today. Speaking of the Braves and Mets and the series that's ongoing there, you can read more about that online at Atlanta Journal-Constitution, AJC.com. Also, a really good column from Mark Bradley looking at the Atlanta Hawks' return to the playoffs against the New York Knicks. That's going to be really interesting. And sad night, I guess, last night with an officer-involved shooting in Decatur. You can read more about that. Sad and scary stuff, really. Too much of that kind of news lately, it seems. On a happier note, there's going to be a cool, the artist, is it Banksy? Is that how you say it? There's going to be a cool Banksy exhibit at one of the galleries here around Atlanta. You can find out more about that online at Atlanta Journal-Constitution, AJC.com. Hey, thank you so much for being here as part of our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. I hope all of you have a great day. We will see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Then our R.S. Andrews Cool Down after that, rsandrews.com. They'll get your air conditioning tuned back up to factory fresh specs. So have a great day. I'll see you back here again tomorrow. For more DawgNation videos, check out youtube.com/DawgNation.